Okay, so we're going to get started now. So thank you all for being here tonight. This is the sixth and final fall 2020 meeting of the Florida State University chapter of the International Association of Emergency Managers. We've really had a great revival year so far. We had former head of FEMA, Brock Long, speak to us. We had Todd DeVoe, host of the IAEM Weekly podcast, speak to us. Laura Hart, FSU faculty member. Other names such as Christy Rojas with Volunteer Florida. Tom Cisco with Volusia County Emergency Management. And so we're going to finish out the semester with another very big name in the field of emergency management, Brittany Castillo with Ash Britt Environmental, and also a second speaker tonight, Dilia Camacho. She's a regional manager with Ash Britt Environmental. They both have lots and lots of experience in the public and private sectors. Brittany Castillo, I know, was a prosecutor. She has even legal experience besides EM, just an amazing plethora of experience. She's helped respond to, or excuse me, recover from the major disasters such as Hurricanes Matthew, Irma, wildfires in California in 2017, 2018, and so much more. And so it's incredible to have them here tonight with us. We're gonna have a great talk. I'm so glad you're all here, and I will now pass it over to Brittany.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for the opportunity to join you all this evening. We are going to tell you a little bit about our company and about the disaster response industry specifically related to debris management post-disaster. It's a really robust, really interesting industry, but not one typically focused on or covered in a lot of emergency management programs. And there's a lot of meat to it. There's a lot of really great career opportunities in this field. And so we're really excited to share. And I'm really grateful that Dilia is able to join us this evening. Before we jump right in though, we are gonna share a video that'll help you it's an animated video to give you a little taste of what we do on the debris response side of AshBritt. This is the only technical glitch we might have here. So hold on, let me unshare my screen.
Can I play?
Yes, please.
When disaster strikes,
sorry, is everyone able to see that?
Sorry, what?
Good.
Citizens must work together on a path to recovery. Debris management is a crucial part of this process of rebuilding a community. The first priority is ensuring the health and safety of citizens. Clearing routes to shelters, hospitals, and critical infrastructure is called emergency push and typically happens immediately after a storm. Immediate response operations may also include providing generators, food and water, and removing impacted trees or dangerous power lines. The next priority is debris collection. Municipalities are divided into debris removal zones. Crews remove vegetation, sand, silt, components of structures, vehicles and vessels from improved public property and right-of-way. Removal from private property may also be authorized. The community is a key partner in recovery. Citizens help speed cleanup by sorting their debris into 6 categories, placing them curbside away from trees, poles, fire hydrants, and other structures. Once debris is collected, it is typically routed to temporary debris management sites, where it is sorted for recycling or disposal reduction. Municipalities typically utilize electronic debris monitoring systems to track material volume, pickup location, and final destination, an important part of disaster response, specifically when seeking reimbursement from FEMA. Establishing partnerships with local businesses and mobilizing and training a locally contracted workforce is another critical component to a successful response. Debris management requires training, planning, and public-private partnerships, all conducted with professionalism and compassion. Because disaster response is about much more than removing debris. It's about safely restoring hope to a community.
Great. So that looks like that animated video was able to be shared and seen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I personally was mostly able to hear it, but I mean, it was informative nonetheless.
All right, well, we'll share a link. So AshBritt created the short animated video, which you heard the audio and maybe some of you saw the animation for. And that was actually in response to a lot of cities and counties, actually particularly 2 in the state of Florida, that wanted us to help support their public information offices and their campaigns to get out awareness with their citizens. So that's a little sneak preview that we'll come back to here later in the presentation. But that was really the impetus for the video, to create something that was easily digested and understood by the public. And that's something that we're able to offer in different languages as well to meet the needs of the citizens. So AshBritt Environmental. AshBritt is one of the nation's leading disaster response and recovery companies. We are experts in really turnkey disaster logistics, and our core business area is debris removal and environmental services post-disaster. We also do a variety of consulting services, post-disaster housing repair and reconstruction, and other such services. But we're really going to focus on the debris management side today. AshBritt is celebrating its 29th year, and we have completed over 400 disaster response missions, 31 special environmental projects, been involved in over 60 federally declared disaster events in over 20 different states. So here on the map, you'll kind of see some of our statistics for key missions. Hurricane Katrina, our work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers following the Northern California wildfires, Hurricanes Irma, Michael, and Dorian. And we'll kind of return back here and share this presentation for y'all, if you have questions. And that actually leads me to say, if you have questions, please feel free to jump in anytime. We've got a presentation prepared, but feel free to make this collaborative and interactive as you go along. So this kind of highlights the 2017 and 18 season of activations. So what does AshBritt do? AshBritt is one of a handful of contractors that have contracts across the United States. These are contracts that are in place pre-disaster. So what that looks like, it would be kind of an insurance policy that municipalities have on their shelf in the event that they're impacted by a disaster. So we go beyond that, more robust, and we really work turnkey around the year with our clients to plan, prepare for disasters, and of course be the responder in the event that there is a need to respond. So in 2017 and 18, obviously, I think a lot of people, FSU, if you were living in Florida, you were well aware, was when you had Hurricane Harvey come up and impact basically the kind of entirety of Texas, followed by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. And then you had some of the worst wildfires and fires in California to date. So following that activation, AshBritt worked in over 70 jurisdictions in 3 states. So we worked for 68 different cities or counties across Florida. We worked in Georgia. We worked in South Carolina. So this is following just Irma. And additionally, we had work in Texas. And then we responded to the California wildfires. So that's a tremendous volume of work. And probably was the lead contractor in the country as far as volumes of work. So, and Dilia, feel free to jump in here. What did that work look like? In Monroe County and in Collier County, which is the Naples area, we were before the storm on the ground, riding out the storm in EOCs with cities and counties. We were provided over 1,000 beds for first responders, government officials in Monroe and in Collier, and then in some places, citizens that had to evacuate, visited and stayed at those shelters as well. We had turnkey services, so that's laundry, bathrooms, shower, ice, food, water at those shelters as well. Then following the storm, we were the lead for the debris removal in those jurisdictions listed. And then following out in some jurisdictions with environmental services, that's specialty work in waterways, obviously considering both the natural habitats and the water and environmental sensitivities also. So we've got team members that cross the spectrum from the housing logistics experts, the debris removal, heavy equipment side, and then of course you have the environmental policy side as well. I love this slide because I think it gives a little more meat to the bones. So that same 2017-18 year where you had Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, Maria, which everyone remembers really closely, you had some of the worst wildfires They were the worst at that point in California, although the recent ones I think have surpassed. So AshBritt is a contractor for cities, counties, and states. The federal government also maps out the entire United States and has pre-positioned contracts to respond to debris generating events. So that could be tornadoes, fires, floods, hurricanes. So these are in place so that the federal government, along with the contractors, can plan year round in the event that you have a natural disaster. When these fires happened, AshBritt was the contractor for the two most populous and disaster prone regions. So we're the contractor for the South Atlantic United States, which is Florida, Alabama through the Carolinas, then the South Pacific, which includes the entire state of California. So we would do a lot of training for, worst case events. One of the worst case events is a major earthquake impacting California where you cannot bring resources in from the east. And so that you are using barges to hold debris. You're using barges for, morgues, for life safety. You're helicoptering in food, ice, water. And so we do these really robust trainings with both cities, counties, states, and the federal government. We were called upon for the fires, and you can see here with the Golden Gate Bridge example, the project removed more than just almost 2 times the weight of the Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, that's like an incredible amount of material. AshBritt alone, as the prime contractor, cleared over 2,000 properties. And so those are people's homes. It was a really interesting, very impactful mission. As part of our contract, the property owners were notified and they could come, and many did come watch us demolishing the remains of their property and clearing the debris. So it was a tremendous, tremendous project. And if you have questions, feel free. There was really interesting environmental air monitoring. We had archaeological monitoring. We had tribal monitoring as it sits in tribal lands. So we had really a whole facet of team members on that project. And so that's some statistics there on that project. AshBritt, for our response operation and year-round training, has taken a 9-phase approach. It's kind of our custom approach. And you can see here that phase 1 is what we do year-round. That's planning and preparing. Phase 2 is when an event is happening that you can plan for, like a hurricane coming. That's our ready and watch phase, where we start activating our response mechanisms. Phase 3 is monitor, alert, and notifying. So our team members are sitting various places across the United States, reaching out, hey, a hurricane's coming to South Florida. It looks like from Miami-Dade County through Volusia County is in the cone, reaching out to those clients, determining who wants us to be forward-facing in their EOCs, who wants us to have equipment staged in anticipation. You've got people on the beach that might want us to help with some beach anticipating of flooding and erosion issues on the front end, et cetera, et cetera. Phase 4 is our strike assessment and clearance. We're going in, we're clearing roads to critical infrastructure that might be impassable due to the storm. So that's shelters, that's hospitals, clearing space for first responders, utility companies to come in to get immediate life-saving measures back in place. Phase 5 is us getting our equipment ready to go for the longer term debris removal recovery, setting up our dump sites, getting relationships with landfills and recycling centers that'll be taking all the debris that's been generated from a storm. Phase 6 is specialty work. Phase 7 is finalizing the entire cleanup. Phase 8 is the environmental and site restoration and closeout. And then phase 9 is supporting the cities and counties with the entire audit. I'm sure you all are well aware, these are federally funded projects, so it gets quite complex with cities, counties, states, and the federal government. Dilia?
Okay. All right. So,
I'm sorry. I jumped right in, and Dilia has a really interesting background. Stefan was gracious to introduce me. So, Dilia, please, if you don't mind, pausing and giving everyone a little bit of your background before we jump in.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So I'm Dilia Camacho. I am the newest member to the Ash Britt family. I have a unique and diverse background. You know, I've worked in the private and the public sector. In the private sector, more on the logistics and transportation side. And in the public sector, I was a public servant for county government for 9 years. I was a director prior to my onboarding with Ash Britt. I was a director of solid and hazardous waste for Collier County, Florida. And I am very, very happy to make this transition. As you know, debris removal is one of my peak interests. I spearheaded the actual project for Collier County for Hurricane Irma, collecting over 3.6 million cubic yards of debris, and I worked hand in hand with Ash Britt on that debris recovery mission. As Brittany has stated, you know, that was a very unique storm in Collier County. We experienced a lot of problems, you know, from the electricity going out to 315 lift stations down that required generators and food. So, you know, I know firsthand, I've witnessed firsthand what it's like to be in the midst of such a, you know, chaotic event. But overall, you know, Ash Britt was really great in providing all the ancillary services that we needed to get that project moving forward. So that's a little bit of my background. Moving on with our year-round training and preparedness, you know, as an industry leader in disaster response and recovery, Ash Britt is committed to public health and safety and helping communities in their time of needs. One of the most valuable components of this initiative is to share our industry knowledge freely and through different platforms, whether it be, you know, through discussion platforms, training platforms, and, you know, encourage the preparedness of hurricane on all types of levels. So year-round, we facilitate annual debris management trainings, whether in person or training sessions to our clients. You know, we do workshop and conferences. We also do online presentations and meetings. And one of the most important components is that, you know, we review lessons learned from previous storm seasons. These lessons learned really they help us, you know, build a foundation to better our processes and better improve our services. So, you know, we definitely, you know, highlight our successes, but we also identify our areas of operational improvements. We are a great proponent. We like to see our clients face to face. We like to meet them. We like to visit them. And we also like to see what type of changes they have going on within that year, staffing levels. And also we take the opportunity to go ahead and complete site inspections. Those site inspections are for these debris management sites. And that's where all of the debris is actually held or stockpiled temporarily and processed. You know, at many times, you know, counties, land is very scarce, and some of these debris management sites are used for development, you know, and then of course, then you have to go ahead and inspect new sites. So we inspect the existing sites and any new sites to predetermine that, you know, it is a viable alternative and it's a viable site to use in the event of a storm. One of the biggest components that we do offer our clients is, you know, we review the disaster debris management plan. Now, for those of you who don't know what the disaster debris management plan is, it's an all-in-one guide on how to actually handle different types of emergency situations. You know, it highlights, you know, who are the key stakeholders in the particular area, meaning the county, the city, the jurisdiction, or the state. It also, it kind of outlines more of the platform where, you know, where do you go to, how do you get things done, who do you communicate with, who is the debris management team that you're going to be working with, you know, what are the key components that I need, who actually handles the zone maps for these jurisdictions. Now, zone maps are really important because they actually outline, you know, the actual jurisdiction, and with FEMA guidelines and policies, you really have to adhere to those particular rules, because if you overextend yourself past the boundary, then some of this material may become ineligible, and you know it won't satisfy for reimbursements. So
can I jump in there? So
sure.
To give a real life example for all those in Tallahassee, that was a real life headache for me. Those of you at FSU will know Tallahassee well. And something I came to learn about Tallahassee after Hurricane Michael was So AshBritt is the contractor for both the city of Tallahassee and for Leon County. And apparently Leon County and Tallahassee has some of the most complicated road system in the state of Florida, if not elsewhere. So maybe you all have noticed this, but apparently your road, I don't know if you had a reason to know this, your roads jump from city, county. So apparently, I wish I should have pulled the examples of some of the maps. I have studied the city of Tallahassee map, much to my frustration, to deal with the problem, because you have to keep debris segregated. So per these debris management plans, you have to ensure that you track what debris comes from city roads and what comes from county roads from appropriate reimbursement. So any debris that comes off of FSU roads can't be paid for by the city or the county. You have lots of state, I guess, parks there as well. So apparently you have roads where one road, it's city on one side and county on the right. So if you're driving north, the east side and the west side are owned and maintained by the city or the county. You have other roads that for a quarter mile are run by the city, then for the next quarter mile of the county, and the next quarter mile of the city. So there's some really interesting kind of complex areas that we experience firsthand in the city of Tallahassee and Leon County. And I say that just, it goes to the planning that Dilia was saying year round, is really knowing the city and county's debris management plans, their zone maps, their GIS systems and planning. And so it really is robust, and to have a really strong team like AshBritt has to grow and to be able to do this anywhere in the United States. If you stop and pause and think about it, it really is incredible that you have a team of people that can, on a moment's notice, be the kind of second responders, if you will, and do major operations at any place in the United States. And that the planning that takes year round is really tremendous. So if your interest area is GIS mapping, if it's data management, if it's operations planning, we're going to get into careers in the field in the private sector in a bit, but just kind of plugging that so you're making the connections along the way.
Alrighty. So AshBritt, we also provide our internal training and preparedness. I like to think that, we are our own worst critic. We really kind of look into our lessons learned and, from previous storm season, and we review our operational process, and we highlight our successes, what worked. And we also we're really critical of what doesn't work. We maintain training and certifications and refresher courses, either through OSHA certifications or FEMA through the NIMS type of certifications. We also research and identify different technological advances that may improve our debris recovery missions. A key component is, technology is constantly advancing, and, we like to stay on top of the curve to make sure that, we're providing the best service to our clients. We also stay current on all FEMA public assistance and policy guidelines. And it's one of a crucial component of what we do for our clients, because based on that is, it requires that type of reimbursement or that eligibility. We, just like everybody else, we do training workshops and conferences. We want to stay ahead. We want to keep our workforce trained. We're actively involved in state and local industry resources organization like the Community Emergency Response Teams, which is CERT, which is basically a program that educates volunteers and actually gives them some type of basic skill set on debris management. We also, this year, we're very, very, very excited that AshBritt, launched its dedicated online training portal. Yay! It's 4 training videos, and it targets a broad spectrum audience to include, the public sector officials, subcontractor partners, nonprofit organizations, individuals, and volunteers. Now, this particular program was launched right at the onset of hurricane season, which was basically kind of like right in the curve when we were, going through the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was basically, it served as an online platform for those public sector officials that, they were so stressed and strained from the COVID pandemic of handling that particular emergency that they really didn't have that time or that face time available to go ahead and do our annual year-on trainings. So this platform actually served, it was flexible enough that they could go ahead and, log in anytime they wanted and get that necessary training that they needed. This training is accessible freely to anybody who actually wants to see it. You just go on ashbritt.com and click on the online portal, and basically you yourself can go in there and take a look at what AshBritt has to offer and the types of trainings that are out there. So this year, AshBritt started, we initiated our new education outreach program, and it was basically to augment existing outreach programs for our clients. And it's actually provided an additional support to help them communicate with their residents. And this particular campaign was focused on separation of storm debris for residential customers. Separating of storm debris is critical when you're actually working a debris recovery mission, only because one, it really expedites the debris recovery process. When you have a bunch of storm debris commingled, it's really difficult to go ahead and separate that. So we want to go ahead and try to get the word out to separate that storm debris firsthand from the very beginning at the onset, rather than having to go back and, you know, try to do that manually. It's really time consuming. And also it's one of the FEMA policy requirements, the guideline requirements for reimbursement is that, you know, not all debris is eligible for reimbursement. And in this particular section, it outlines, you know, what's eligible, what's not. And some of these materials are hazardous in nature. They, you know, you can't mix them. They can't be commingled with anything else. So it's a basic outline of, you know, what separating of storm debris looks like. This particular print or article was actually, it's custom made, so you can different types of counties could, you know, customize this to suit their educational programs that they have on site. So the clients, you know, of course, this was for our clients. It also served communities and it also served businesses. This particular campaign, you know, we did direct mailers on it. And, you know, as Brittany spoke earlier today, Tallahassee and the city of Jacksonville, they were one of the contributors. So maybe you saw this come through the direct mailers. We also did a newspaper and print ads for Cameron County, Texas. Also advertising this for the residents. In addition to that, sorry, Brittany. In addition to that, we went ahead and we did NPR radio campaigns. So these were huge campaigns that really just targeted residential communities. You know, are you ready for hurricane season? How do you prepare? You know, just giving them, you know, brief insight on what they can do to prepare. And in addition to that, you know, we also had one that went out to the businesses. Now, usually AshBritt is a big proponent of, you know, of increasing that business program aspect, you know, when a storm hits for that recovery mission. So they have the ability to participate if they register with us. So we also had that platform name for businesses. And these particular NPR radio ads, they went through South Florida and also the greater Houston area.
Yeah. And I would just add, that so the business model for AshBritt is certainly to respond post-event to disasters, to debris generating events. The relationship model that goes with that, our ethics as a company, our company culture, is to offer holistic pre-planning, mitigation, resiliency, training, and support materials for those communities where we work. And so the education outreach component of our company, and this is something that Dilia has come on board and really spearheaded this year and helping us grow, is offering those resources year round, in addition to kind of the business generating event, which is really the post-storm work. I'm a bad slide manager. I don't know why. sorry about that, Dilia.
It's fine. So now we're going to switch gears. We're actually going to talk a little bit, little factoids. So thanks to Noah. So Noah has this really cool chart out there that I thought was interesting to share. It actually, gives you a brief recap, of what the disaster or the severe events look like from 1980 through 2019. So, just to kind of run down a little bit. So we've had a total of about 26 droughts, 32 floodings, 9 freezing storms, 113 severe storms, and you could see the rest. But, what's interesting enough is the average cost for these storms. So for drought, it's about $9.6 billion for each event. Flooding, 4.6. And if you look down to the tropical cyclones, it's about 21.5 billion. So that, to put that into perspective, we're going to go ahead and use those calculations later on in the presentation to kind of get a brief outlook of what the estimate's going to look like for our record-breaking 2020 hurricane season. Go ahead, Brittany. All right, so in an overview of the 2020 Atlantic tropical cyclone, we've had about 30 named storms as of November 24th, 2020. 6 of them, they fell in love with the Gulf Coast. They hit the Gulf Coast and, you know, devastating some of that area. The good news is it's November 30th, and guess what? Hurricane season has officially ended. Yep, next slide.
I'll just add that AshBritt's currently working in Mississippi and in Escambia County, responding to storms that did impact those areas this year.
Okay, so going back to that previous slide that we talked about, more of like the estimated value of what these storms look like, what the cost looks like. So developed this chart to kind of have a glimpse of a 5-year more or less projection. So in 2016, FEMA had a total of 86 declared disaster declarations, of all estimating a total about $46 million. In 2017, they had approximately 140 disaster declarations, totaling about $318 billion. Moving on to 2018, 110, about $91 billion. 2019, we had 75, totaling about $45 billion. Now the 2020 records, again, these are just estimates, and these are only based on tropical cyclones. It does not include, you know, the wildfires that are going on, the tornadoes, the severe storms that have occurred either. The number of the 281 declared disaster events, that encompasses the whole spectrum of all of the storms. The 387 billion only encompasses the tropical cyclones. So just to have an overview, like I stated before, the weather, climates, and you know, the weather and climate disasters. So we had a mixture of everything in 2020. And again, this doesn't capture the full year or the full hurricane or storm season. So we had, like I said, we had some wildfires. We also had droughts. We had some severe storms. We had some hailstorms. We had some hurricanes, a couple of hurricanes, 30 hurricanes. Well, no, 30 storms. And then we also had tornadoes and again, more tropical storms. Okay, so moving into the storm season preparedness post-COVID. So storm season, hurricane season usually begins in June 1st. By the time in 2020, we were really into the curve of COVID-19. And, you know, we actually started the season with a strained working environment for first line responders, limited resources with state and local governments because of COVID. The state and local governments were, you know, they had operational challenges. They were adapting to the new working environments and, of course, the CDC and COVID guidelines. You know, many of the staff was working remotely. So, you know, in essence, some of the actual operations kind of had a pause, or they kind of stood still. A decrease in staffing levels. You know, a lot of people got sick from COVID. You know, they couldn't go to work. And also you have to really take into account, you know, when you have a pandemic this size, you know, you have a huge, huge financial burden. So what's the actual hidden cost? So, you know, these states and local governments, you know, they're managing COVID-19, they're responding, you know, they're buying all that PPE that, you know, it really wasn't in the budget that year to go ahead and purchase. Of course, that's eating up a good portion of your hurricane preparedness or your hurricane budget. And of course, by the time storm season began, everybody had COVID fatigue. You know, throwing COVID with storm season, it was bound for a memorable 2020 storm season. And of course, with everybody being so busy, you know, there was very limited time for training and preparedness. So what did our industry resources look like post-COVID-19? Well, you know, the resources were limited. You know, temporary economic shutdown. You know, you had permanent business closing. You had a rise of unemployment and a decrease in the labor force. Limited employment opportunities. Of course, at universities and, you know, any type of educational platforms that, you know, in-person training, they were for a good majority of the time. And also, you know, you had industry volunteers halted. So all of these nonprofit organizations that, really recruit volunteers, because of the COVID and the CDC restrictions for social distancing, all of those programs paused. And this in turn caused a huge need for volunteers within the industry.
Brittany, you're muted.
Thanks. I was gonna say, so here are some of our resources, and I was gonna say we only have a few more slides, so please feel free to jump in with questions or commentary. With COVID-19, we are a disaster response contractor. The only pandemic, though, in about, I think at 2014, when there was the Ebola concern that there would be an Ebola outbreak in the United States, AshBritt was called on by a handful of states to help respond and have pandemic planning. And thankfully that didn't turn into a tremendous concern in the United States. That said, we are a lot of cities, counties, and states where their go-to disaster responder, partner. And so when the COVID-19 pandemic did come to the States, we were called on by many cities, counties, states to see what we could do to support. So we did manage. So we did the turnkey logistics and running of 5 field hospitals for the state of Massachusetts. We actually had a short-term project just helping out the state with turning empty motels into housing for homeless populations and doing some transfer with homeless populations following that to support those communities. We did some enhanced janitorial services for school districts and other agencies. And then we also were providing meals to the National Guard and to medical professionals that were doing COVID-19 remote testing sites, those field sites. So that's kind of a sample of how we were able to support in logistics and response for the pandemic. Dilia, did you have anything to add?
Only that, we were very much involved with any type of recovery efforts that came with COVID-19. As Brittany has stated earlier, it's incredible how we're able to go ahead and jump at a moment's notice and prepare where there's a disaster event. But by the same token, we're really prepared to go ahead and jump on a moment's notice to handle a pandemic that everybody is practically new to. So we did a lot of those preparedness for COVID. And as Brittany stated, we did a lot of meal preparations in those hospitals. And this was something that, we had from our past experience from, debris management, and working with those ancillary services to provide that type of home-based type of tent relief or support to counties. We were able to go ahead and quickly adjust and modify and provide that very important, support to hospitals up north. And looking at our planning and preparedness outreach. So, our partnership really, it extends far beyond that debris management framework and, providing sound and viable solutions for emergency response and to our customers that preserve the quality of life and also introduces some type of normalcy and support initiatives that help long-term recoveries. And with this in mind, again, when a disaster strikes, small businesses and residents are, where primarily they're impacted. And some of these small businesses really do need that opportunity to go ahead and, keep that economy going. So what AshBritt does, we support efforts that promote disaster recovery efforts through local vendor programs. Again, through the registration, small businesses are able to work with us through and help with their communal disaster recovery efforts. For volunteers, the industry needs volunteers. Without them, again, right now the industry is strained because of the COVID pandemic. Without volunteers, I think the industry would be even more strained. So to become an active debris recovery volunteer through local nonprofit relief organizations, you could go through CERT, NVO, AD, which is a national voluntary organization active in disaster. the Florida VOD was Florida National Voluntary Organization in Active Disaster, and it partners with the Florida Department of Emergency Management. Habitat for Humanity, we're all familiar with them. They provide a great service to the community, and of course the American Red Cross. For additional resources, I provided a link there for more volunteer resources.
This is it. Oh, am I muted still? No, this is our last slide here. And it's really kind of coming into disaster response and emergency management careers. And we kind of listed some in the private sector, in the public sector, which I imagine you guys may be most familiar with. And of course, nonprofit organizations. I'm often told, in various, whether it's from friends, from colleagues, banking, insurance, chamber of commerce events, that people kind of stop and go, "Wow, I never think about your industry," right? No one thinks that there's a whole industry of really the debris removal post-disaster and how complex and robust, like I said, that it is. I think the debris removal industry is best kind of understood as a triangle or a three-legged stool. So you've got the public entity, the city, the county, the state, the federal government, who partners with a contractor. That's the one with the heavy iron, the equipment cleaning the debris. And then the third leg of the stool, if you will, is the monitoring firm. So by FEMA guidelines, cities, counties, states, the public municipality is required to monitor the work of the contractor. So that's, if you look at our animated video, that's kind of the electronic monitoring system that tracks the debris. And those people also serve as really the technical guidance experts and the auditing experts with the contractor for the city and county. So that's kind of it. Dilia, did you have anything to say on the careers?
Yes, I like the way you did the whole diagram. But in addition to that, there's other types of careers that also have that ability to kind of lead you into that career path of disaster debris. Waste management, you're dealing with waste, and it's basically more or less the same concept. In the event of a storm, that you'll be doing that type of work. So basically all of the careers that are outlined here on this particular slide, they have the ability to kind of enter into that realm or prepare you for that type of career path that, if you're looking to go into debris management.
And I will give a little plug. I just actually 2 weeks ago gave a little kind of a TED Talk-esque talk at the International Association of Emergency Management Conference on the need to have more women in the field and field operations. It's a 7-minute video. We'll try to share the link here with your group. And it really highlights the financial opportunities for women in particular going into this field and careers. And it also really highlights that until cities and counties incorporate more women and certainly diversity of all kinds at every level of the response, you're really not going to be able to achieve resilient cities. So, all of us know that women tend to be kind of the lead purchasers for families, most grounded in religious organizations, other grassroots organizations that most people turn to help respond. And so we really need to incorporate those leaders at the front end as well. I think the disaster response and emergency management industry does a really good job, has made huge strides in diversity of all kinds, but tends to be more white collar and in leadership levels. And I think you really need to see a spectrum of leaders in the field. So if that's of interest to you, it's a passion area of mine, and I'd love to talk more about some of the research I've done and talk about those opportunities. The last thing I'll say is if anyone is interested, AshBritt does offer on occasion paid internships. We offer internships. The internships are always paid, and we have them on occasion. Tend to be a lot of storm-based, so you can go in the field operations. We had a group of interns from Savannah State University recently in Bay County, Panama City area, and had really good feedback on that program. We have opportunities out of our headquarters, which is in Deerfield Beach, Florida as well. So if that's of interest to you, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, as far as that email, yeah, we'll make sure to put that out in our own email to our members after the meeting. I know I have a bunch of questions myself, but I'd love to open the floor to any of our members or other officers first. If you guys want to ask any questions, ask away.
I'll go ahead and ask a question about internships. I smiled when you said you're in Deerfield Beach because I'm from Lighthouse Point. So I went to Deerfield Beach Middle and know the area very well. So how would we go about kind of like investigating an internship with you guys?
Sure, absolutely. So reach out. It's training@ashbritt.com. I'm Brittany at ashbritt.com. And Dilia, I don't know if you're dcamacho or
dcamacho at ashbritt.com.
so, but if you go to training, we get routed together, and just kind of reach out with your resume and we'll respond and have a conversation. So our internship program really is a bit ad hoc because it's dependent on what we've got going on at the time. So in the summer, we might have more kind of routine administrative or support on the procurement side, on some of those client training and education, but reach out and let us know, hey, I'm really interested in XYZ, or I think I'm interested in XYZ, or hey, what do you have? I'm open to anything, and we'll build out from there.
Thank you.
Yeah, anyone who'd like to ask a question, just go for it. You know, the floor is yours. Like I said, I have a bunch, but want to let you guys all get to it first.
Yeah, and I'll point you to the chat too. I think Andreas shared both the animated video that we sit, and then we've got some great drone footage of some of our jobs, and that might be kind of give you some context. And always check out our website; it has some more as well.
I'm Andrea. I know I work for AshBritt, but I wanted to ask a quick question that I know might be beneficial to the students. Could you explain why the private sector is involved when you talk about like resources around the country, which is something I had never ever thought about. So I think it might be interesting to the students.
Sure. And this wasn't a planted question, so if I don't answer, feel free to jump in because you are quite the expert as well. So the private sector is really kind of an interesting need in the industry because you think of where you would hold resources, right? So say a hurricane's coming in Florida. Do we have trucks in Deerfield Beach? Well, what if the storm happens in Orlando and there's, inability to impasse, right? What if you've got a fire in California and there's specialty response requirements there? So having the model of kind of an expert private sector logistics company really allows you to come in and respond where the need is, and then bring the resources in from local, regional, or national partners as needed. So Dilia emphasized, our goal is to have local economic recovery occur alongside local physical recovery. So to the extent possible, we are going to be putting local contractors to work and utilizing those resources. It's not always an option in the immediate aftermath of an event, because oftentimes those resources, those small business owners are taking care of their own health, life, safety, and those of their family members. And so oftentimes we come in, we bring the resources needed to get a community back up and running, and then we weave and integrate in the local businesses as much as possible for that robust economic recovery. Dilia, Andrea, anything to add there?
The only thing I would like to say, coming in from more of the public sector into the private sector, it's really unique to see the magnitude of the subcontractors or the local level, the response that you get, and the amount of coordination that goes into it. I mean, it's once that whole project is up and running, it's really, really great to see. So, I do on that platform, I do encourage, anybody that's interested in that internship. I mean, it would be great to see anything that's local that happens here, the response, for Hurricane Irma, we were activated in about 68 jurisdictions. So to see that initiative and that response from all these private entities that could, flooding Florida, to go ahead and respond to Hurricane Irma, that was extremely impressive to see.
Well, a question I'd like to ask Brittany. Brittany, going back to your work as a prosecutor, do you feel like there were skills or anything in particular that you were able to bring with you from your time as a prosecutor to eventually leading AshBritt, or did they end up being really radically different worlds? I'd be curious to hear about that perspective.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I did do a stint with government contracting on the legal side, which is a much more natural fit to where we are today, given that I manage a company that has government contracts. That said, I do think there's a really good connection between the work as a prosecutor. So on one side, you have the hard skills, right? Being in front of a judge, being in front of a jury, preparing a case. And that translates into a lot of what I do as my leadership in the CEO. I do a lot of work with public speaking at city, county commission meetings, elected officials, et cetera. But also the trial preparation is very similar to our proposal preparation. Our response to contracts with the federal government, I kid you not, are like, yay, like 6 or 7 large binders full. And so, those hard schools of detail orientation and preparing documents for sure. But I did a lot as a prosecutor of, unfortunately, the child sexual assault and domestic violence cases. And so I think that it's chaos management from a different level. You're really multi-party, multi-agency, incredibly high stress, incredibly catastrophic to families and individuals that have experienced this. And so I got to work on some really great task forces with federal law enforcement as well. And so you do have that multi-agency collaboration of high stress environments. And I think that served well to being on the ground in disaster events.
Okay, well, speaking of high stress and, the fact that you're a CEO and everything, if I may ask, what have been, whether it's as a prosecutor or as a CEO, what have been the most stressful, it's the most utterly intense parts of your career? How did you, best get through those parts of your career? And also, what were some of the most rewarding moments of your career so far?
Yeah, I think this year in particular, knowing that our job is to send people into crisis, and we do that to a degree when we put people in a community before a storm comes, but we know that we're putting them, in an EOC, hunkered down, safety. Here, we're asking team members to go into communities, travel during COVID, staff COVID-19 shelters. So for the impact on our employees, but also on their families, we have a really close-knit group of people. I'm really proud. It's what I'm most proud to share of our leadership team. 9 of the members have been over 17 years, and I think about 4 of those over 23. So we've got some really, long-term, and it becomes a family. People go on the road for 3, 4, 5, 6 months to respond to an event and live together. So to put people in harm's way and then need them to come back in the office and manage those dynamics from a people and then practically also from a liability standpoint, which I have to think about, was tremendously difficult this year. Conversely, I think that our industry allows you to have the best of the public sector, private sector, and nonprofit sector, the best of white collar, blue collar. You got to work with all sorts of different people that you might not otherwise work with. You got to be kind of dropped into all sorts of communities and learn about their neighborhoods, their communities, and become part of that. I think that's a really interesting life experience that gives a lot of kind of fruit to your life, if you will. And we get to work a lot, like I said, with nonprofits, and we get to contribute. We just did a $750,000 contribution after we worked in Bay County after Hurricane Michael. So up there in the Panhandle, and we actually kind of talking about merging of past. The Child Advocacy Center, which works with children that have experienced sexual assault, their roof blew off, and we helped do a whole building. It turned into, hey, we'll help you with one, and it turned to a $750,000 commitment to help them redo their whole center. So getting to be in a community, we did $1 million project in California to help a neighborhood on a kind of neighborhood-driven rebuild after the fires impacted their community. So the best of it, I think, is getting to really grow with a community that's experienced a tragic event.
Yeah, well, as far as the part you mentioned about going away somewhere for 4, 5, 6 months, and how the work team becomes a family and everything. Yeah, I got to be honest with you. When I went to the Florida Emergency Preparedness Association conference back in February, one of the hardest things I actually heard from somebody there that I met and networked with, who they work. I won't mention the name, but they work with a different contracting firm. One of the hardest things I heard. Figure it out. Well, one of the hardest things I heard from them, this was a gentleman who had decades of experience. He said to me, "This is not the field to go in if you want to have a family." And that was really interesting to hear. Would you have anything to say about that? I mean, maybe, I don't know if it's a tough topic, but especially for us young.
I don't know if you heard my 1.5-year-old screaming in the background during the Zoom. So that's a great question if you did. His father was supposed to put him to bed. So that's probably what the screaming's about. Nonetheless. So a couple quick notes. One, in the debris management, there's about 5 companies that do 90% of the work across the United States. 4 are relatively, are not publicly, and there's 1 public large company. So it's kind of 4 family owned or small businesses as far as ownership, not revenue. We're us being one of those and 1 large one. So we know a lot of people do it for decades. It's kind of, if it works for you, it works. It is incredibly hard on families. And that said, there's, if this is what you're passionate about and this is what you're interested in doing, I think you can find opportunities and hopefully find companies that support you. I did live in California. I lived in California for 6 months leading that project. During Hurricane Matthew, I lived in Charleston and I lived in Savannah. We had operations in Charleston and then down into St. John's and Volusia County in Florida. And so that was kind of my middle point, and I went back. It had nothing to do that Savannah was just a beautiful town to live in. That was a nice side benefit. But so I have had opportunities in my career, and I think it's important to spend a lot of time on the ground learning. But it is very difficult on families. I have lots to say, and I'm happy to continue the conversation on that. Dilia, I mean, you've been on the road this year.
Actually, I have, and I found it really exciting. After a month, you get homesick. You miss the family life, but it's also very rewarding. Once that debris mission is completed and you restore that normalcy and you see communities back to how they were, it's a great feeling. It really is. And when you go in and you see the devastation and you leave and everything's all cleaned up, and it's a different sight. So you do miss home, but again, it has its rewards.
Okay, yeah. No, I might reach out and continue that conversation. That's such an important topic. This is definitely, I think, the kind of stuff that college students would appreciate, kind of figuring out the way ahead of time instead of figuring it out decades later or something. I did have
go in the field early in your career, and you know what? Going in the field, I say being on jobs remote, practically speaking, tends to pay really well. So I think that's a real consideration, especially if you have student loans. But it's a real consideration. And so, if your post-college has you having a little more freedom, there's great opportunities and benefits for, longer term careers as well. And I'd say, Dilia came to us from the private sector or from the public sector. Our general counsel of 12 years left Ash Britt to be Florida's emergency management director. So Director Moskowitz worked for us for 10 years, getting his start in emergency management. So I'd say, there's different ways your path takes you.
Definitely. Yeah, and I did have a question for Dilia. Having worked so extensively in the public sector, and now you're in private, what in your experiences have been the biggest noticeable differences in how they function? Typical workday in each, even any kind of pros and cons. If you had any candid thoughts about any of that.
Be candid.
Yeah. There are two different environments. Two different spectrums of government is so very much, you really have to go through a lot of red tape, and you don't have that flexibility that you do in the private sector. with that said, I really have to say that, with that, I've learned so much in the government component, and have been able to bring all that skill set into what I do now. And, I actually have a different outlook when it comes to these debris projects, because I can literally say that I've sat in their seat and I know what they're going through. So, I can really relate to maybe the operational challenges that they have, and maybe offer some additional insight. In the particular campaign that I spoke about earlier, about that debris storm separation guide, that was something that was drastically needed within the industry. And I'll tell you why. Each county, they have their own marketing dollars, and some of them have more, some of them have less, and some of them don't have that ability to get that education outreach out to their residents. And and when we did this, I was able to utilize that platform, my skill set from what I knew, because I actually, I promoted programs, recycling programs. I'm more into of the waste management, the recycling, reuse type of field. So I was able to incorporate that of my skill set and kind of drive that home with AshBritt, and they actually gave me the flexibility to go ahead and run with it and do it. And it worked really well. It was very welcoming. A lot of the counties were, very pleased with it. And, it kind of opens the door for something else. So, I know the operational challenges, and I try to incorporate that and maybe alleviate or, help and support our clients with the knowledge that I bring with AshBritt.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that insight. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, I have one more question, same question for both of you, but before I ask, would anyone in the audience like to ask anything? Don't be shy. Such a great insight to be learned from here.
I have another question, kind of building on the discussion about family and diversity. How do you think as students we can further kind of the move to a more diverse working environment within the emergency management professional community? And how can we make it more accessible to people who do want to have families and have a really extensive kind of family life?
So you want to take it first?
I see it in this particular outlook. I think if I'd had the chance to get into this field early on the onset of my start of my career, I think this is the platform that I would have utilized to kind of go into different branches. I kind of veered into more of the waste side. I kind of fell in through that, but that actually led me to this same pathway. I just think that coming out of school, I think it would have been a huge learning experience to be able to go ahead and explore this option and handle projects and travel and and see different communities and be part of that recovery process that's so rewarding. And then from there, I probably would have veered into something else. But I actually recommend kind of doing this on the front end when you're young, when you want to go ahead and gain that experience, because this in particular exposes you to so much and has the ability to open so much career paths once you actually get this whole debris management under your belt.
And I guess I would reiterate there's just a tremendous amount of opportunities. We're grateful to kind of close out y'all's semester, and you've had an interesting array of speakers that can speak to kind of all the opportunities. And we were grateful to share the private sector side, because I don't know that it's always in my experience and what I've been told by a lot of students recently is that that's not what comes to campus as much, the private sector side. And so it's a challenge. I think it's there's no way around it. It can be a big challenge, and so it really it depends on what stage you are in life, what you're looking for, what your family's able to provide, support, not kids, no kids. But I wouldn't let that hold you back. Because there's a lot of opportunities, and it really depends on the company, crisis communications, or if you're in the government relations, public policy side, you might only have to be on the road for the first couple of weeks of getting a job up and going, and then be able to be stationed back home. Pending, it really depends. If you're an operations manager or safety officer, you've got to be there for the life of the project. Some companies might switch people in and out. It can be structured. And I guess what I'd say is people want good team members. People want smart, proactive team members. And it's it's obviously very hard to get your foot in the door somewhere, but once you do, and I think in this industry becomes really small, really quick, and people shift between private sector and government. People will find a way, I think, in this industry to keep you on their team if you're adding value. So I would just encourage you on that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll just say really quickly, I'll put a plug. We had someone who came to us at a job fair. He was at a university in Florida, came to us job for it, gave us a resume. Everyone liked him, brought him on because we needed just people. We had like a huge hurricane, needed people. He ended up staying 3 years without a formal job description because everyone just loved him. And he was an awesome guy. He's super hardworking, great attitude. And I met with him a bunch. We put him on, with benefits and eventually, because we're like, you've been here 2 years, you should be a full-time employee. I don't have a job description for you, but if you want to keep going at this, we want to keep you. We ended up eventually having to let him, transition out after like 3 years. And a month later, there was an opportunity and we brought him right back. So, that's us, but I'd say work hard and just keep at it.
Yeah, one of the things I learned from Brock Long when I first met him at the FIPA conference in February was he basically emphasized, don't feel like you have to work in the government, in emergency management. There's lots of great opportunities in the private sector. Part of his talk when he spoke to us was like, get the government out of the way and let the private sector do its thing. Definitely want to reiterate that to you all tonight. Definitely, look into those great opportunities in the private sector, like with AshBritt, for example. So much great stuff to be done with them, and really encourage you to really just capitalize on that.
Yeah, and I'll say, if you're interested in something that's not us, I'm happy to let you know. And I'm not shamed at all to plug you with whoever my counterpart, at a monitoring firm or technical assistance. Like I said, the industry is small, and if what you're interested in isn't what we do, I'm happy to point you in the right direction.
Well, I have one question I'd like to ask. If anyone else, wants to go for it. But if not, I'll ask it. I'll give a moment if anyone wants to ask anything. Such wonderful minds to learn from here.
I'm going to throw one in real quick since I wanted to at least take advantage of this. Wonderful presentation, by the way. Thank you so much. William Garcia, I'm a senior at FSU. I'll be graduating next month. And I've learned that an emergency management experience has been the best teacher. And with the type of volume that you've learned to kind of deal with now, what is the time that you could say that your volume almost reached or exceeded your capacity, and how you were able to deal with that?
Wow, that's a great question. It really is. I would have to say, this industry is so ever evolving, and I can't say you can compare one event to another. You really can't, because there's always unique instances where you're faced with some type of unknown factor and you're like, oh wow, I didn't know that. So I don't think you could put a timeline into at what point are you going to be able to learn what you can learn. I think this is one of those unique industries where you can really kind of always continue learning, because it's such a dynamic environment, and it's ever changing. It's not only changing with the spectrum of the storms, or the type of storms, or the size of storms, the magnitudes and the devastation, but also internally with the rules and the regulations. FEMA is always changing, so you really have to be on top of that as well. So there's always different branches within the spectrum that you continue to learn. I think it's just, I think it kind of lies within that person to say, okay, when have I learned enough, and when is it time for me to kind of make that next move or that next ladder? But I can guarantee you that once you're in this particular field, I'm sure that you will continue to grow and you continue to add to that skill set, because, it's like I said, it's so ever changing and ever evolving.
This is a great answer. So I heard your question a little differently. Maybe was was it from a personal, I think it was answered really well. From a business perspective, are you kind of resource capacity?
I mean, since you're dealing with like debris management mainly, and and I know you kind of set a lot of things in place, but I mean, if there was like, of course, instances where things fall short, people back out, and you can't be able to like reach that same, hey, I need to get this much out, but I only have this much room.
Yeah,
and how that changes, what you're able to do, and how you kind of deal with that mentally and and in the field.
So I think California provides an interesting kind of case study in that. When we were in California, we were working under, so track with me here, it's a little complex. We were called in because the state asked the federal government to supplement resources. So the state of California was like, and I think it was a really smart decision by the governor. So this is right, California, Democratic governor, Trump administration. So this is this is the whole you should rake your leaves to fix forest fires situation. So this is the timeline we're in. So I think it was a really interesting leadership move for sure, a very respectable leadership move, because the state of California was in the peak of fire season and they needed more capacity. So from your first level, that's not a us question, that's kind of a state question saying, and they ended up having more fires in Southern California. So it was very wise after the fact. So the state reaches capacity, says, federal government, we need you to come in. AshBritt's the contractor. AshBritt's a Florida-based company. AshBritt comes in under our federal contract, but the state of California has all sorts of requirements. So it's very difficult for out-of-state companies to do business there. So we were fine, but are limited in how many resources we could come in. Didn't really matter though, because all those resources were in Texas, Puerto Rico, and Florida, responding to Harvey, Maria, and Irma, and Georgia and South Carolina. So the national resources were really strained. And so that was really difficult for us. Back to California, the unions in California, the Northern California is very strong for the unions. And so the unions wanted all the contractors to be union. I can fully support that, but just for conversation point, that's not what our contract required. And so there's these push and pulls between us needing to meet metrics required under our contract and also the way we want to operate. We sat with the civilians and active duty people from the Corps, and we had a plan, and the plan was based on our contract, right? But now they're saying, stop work, you need to have all union crews. So it's just really interesting. And this is happening, I mean, you're working 24-hour days, literally, for those first couple of weeks to get this going. And so balancing resource shortages nationally, given all the storms, balancing requirements for California, balancing the fact that regardless, I had to make the state happy, and I had to make the local elected officials happy, and the county elected officials happy, and the state level people, and the governor, even though none of my contract required that. But that's really important to be able to be strategic in how you're doing business, is incorporate, one, it's best for the community, first and foremost. The community where we worked, this is what they wanted. Second, from a pure business perspective, that's what you need to be effective when you're going to be living there for the next 6-7 months working. And then balancing, obviously, your contract requirements. So to your point, I think this is kind of an example to your point. It's just a tremendous. And so we had workshops in the community. I met with the unions every single day. We brought in local large contractors and taught them how to do debris removal operations. And it required us to bring in a lot more staffing, a lot more field managers. We had to think through new equipment because the equipment that was in the community didn't really effectively serve the purpose. So long answer short that I maybe hope gives you some insight to what you're asking. It's all hands approach, throw ideas out, come up with ways to make it work.
No, that's exactly it. I love it. I mean, I know it's, you guys have been there and done it all and seen it, and we just, get to see the nice presentation, on the screen. But I know it has to be terribly complicated, and I really look up to what you do.
If you love puzzles, come on over. So.
Well, the question I'd like to ask both of you is basically, which specific disasters during your careers have, been the most impactful as far as, major lessons you learned along the way, and just, that you have the greatest memory of, like, wow, that was almost like a turning point, for my involvement in this career, or just how major it was.
Since I have my mic off mute, I keep going back there. There was just something about those California fires. I mean, our crews, a family member, they had 2 urns. This is a horrible story. They had 2 urns. Their twins had passed away and they couldn't find the urns. And so our crews stopped working for a day and a half and we're shifting by hand, and we're able to find these 2 baby urns. And I mean, I was standing, you're just watching this and it's horrible. And there's just no notice. Hurricanes, you have a notice of, that it's coming. And so that was, from a humanitarian human impact, was really, really rough. But I will say Hurricane Michael, we did some interesting waterway work, some specialty waterway work, and a lot of our drinking water comes from that area. And so thinking through the challenges, the environmental challenges, and how important we had to get the operations right, to impact both the natural wildlife and just our ecosystem and our drinking water. That was a really interesting side for me recently as well.
For me, I think it would have to be Hurricane Irma. I had lived through Hurricane Andrew and the devastation that it caused in Miami. I was left without a home, the house destroyed, living with family, and then living through that experience, and then having the opportunity to lead the debris mission here in Collier County was extremely, extremely rewarding. Getting to see the devastated areas and how, with, such a small group of people, a team, basically a 5-county team, worked together with AshBritt to get everything cleaned up in less than 3 months was absolutely amazing. Being there firsthand, making the decisions, dealing with, residential complaints. I think it was just a slew of different components, but it really kind of, it sparked that interest, and it really kind of made me thrive actually in that particular environment. So I think that would have to be the most rewarding experience, only because, I had lived through a hurricane, and a couple of years later, I actually was able to do something and help the community. So I was able to put my skill sets in place. So I would have to say Hurricane Irma.
Okay, wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's great that you were able to take from your own experience and pour into a future disaster event, and really be that much more equipped to really help out and make a difference. That's really great. Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, would anyone like to ask any other question? Don't be shy. Okay. Well, no, I think we had some great discussion, some great Q&A tonight, and I'm so glad that you all came and spoke and presented. This was a really great way to end our strong revival semester, and I'm so appreciative of it. And thank you so much. So big round of applause for Brittany and Dilia. Thank you.
Yay! Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we're going to email out all those links you gave us, the video and that email. I definitely encourage you guys to get in touch with them, see what kinds of internship opportunities might be viable, and just professional opportunities. Obviously, it's a great firm to get involved with, and to really make such a difference with. So thank you once again for speaking to us tonight. It was awesome to make this happen, and thank you so much. For encouraging you guys all to reach out, and thanks for all coming out tonight.
Thank you. Good luck with finals.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Thank you
And
so much.
happy holidays, guys.
Oh, you too.
Happy
Thank you.
holidays.
Bye.
Bye.